Story by Strawberry Sushi Roll. Scene at 12:04 p.m. It was just another normal weekend, and I was chatting on WhatsApp with my best friend. We're from Latin America. He loves sending voice messages. I hate them, but I listen to them because he's my best friend. He asked if he could come over so we could hang out, and I said yes. Now that's when things started to get weird. I remember exactly what he said in the message, his tone of voice, and even the background noises from his house. He was still a little groggy because he'd woken up about 30 minutes or so earlier and said, "I'm just going to take a shower and stop by the pharmacy to get some meds for my sister's cramps." And I replied to that voice message with the text, "Sure, no rush, don't worry." After that, we stopped messaging each other. He was getting ready, and I was just waiting. He lives far from me, on the other side of town, so it takes 40 minutes to get to my place walking. Considering everything he had to do, I figured it would take him over an hour plus to get here, so just keep doing my stuff. He ended up arriving earlier, and I was like, already? I really thought he arrived earlier than I expected, so when I went to open the gate for him, I casually asked, "Wow, you got here so fast. Did you already buy your sister's medicine?" He immediately looked at me, confused, and said, "How did you know I went to the pharmacy for my sister?" I just replied, "Allison, you literally told me that in the voice message." "I didn't send any voice message about that." "Yes, you literally did." "I didn't." My friend likes to make fun of me, and this was typical of the kind of pranks he pulls, so I figured it was just another one of his silly attempts. So I said, "I'll show you." We went into the living room. I grabbed my phone and scrolled back to the beginning of that day's message history, going through them one by one. There was no voice message. We talked about it some more. He's also the type who gets scared easily and gets a little nervous, and I said, "I swear I heard it. How else would I know that?" "I don't know. You're kind of freaking me out," he says. I looked once, twice, 3 times with the utmost patience and care, but the voice message wasn't there, not even my reply. For anyone who might think he simply deleted it, WhatsApp shows a pop-up saying, "This message has been deleted." So that wasn't it. And even so, my direct reply to that voice message was also missing. All the other messages were there in full combo. Only these 2 were missing. We never reached a conclusion. He still swears he didn't send it, and I still vividly remember the audio message. We literally spent that day in shock and fear. We talk to other friends about this incident sometimes when sharing in real-life glitches, and we kinda laugh when we talk about it, but it's a nervous laugh because we still feel a little scared. I had information that my friend swears he did not send to me, and he was genuinely scared, too scared to think it was just another prank. I think I just hopped to a timeline where the information was never shared. I've also had some other experiences with dreams where I wake up and spend a day there, and the events end up coming true when I actually wake up. But in this case, it was nothing like that. At the time, we were both unemployed, and my friend was sleeping a lot and waking up between noon and 1 p.m. I, on the other hand, had been awake since early morning, doing other tasks, taking care of the house, surfing the internet, playing games, etc. I was 100% awake for a while when we began to chat. Sometimes I think that since he sent a voice message, while still a bit groggy and just waking up, he simply forgot to send it. Sometimes we really do forget some tasks we do in that half-asleep state. But for the 2 missing messages, which would explain this, to simply disappear too, that's just too much to explain. So I know what you mean by WhatsApp messages. I've only used it a handful of times, not very frequent, at least in Canada, US. I guess we can use it, but it's not as frequent. Anyways, when you delete a message, yeah, it does say message deleted. Is there a way to hard delete it where even that notification is in there? It's not inconceivable, but the way your friend reacted, it doesn't sound like a prank. He was genuinely terrified and everything and never told you after the fact, so this would have to be a different timeline, I would guess. In these cases, the question I always wonder is just, what did you win? Because in these timeline shifts, it's usually quantum immortality. That involves a death in your originating universe, and so yeah, what did you? What happened to you? There are so many possible ways that we can go out, but it's just funny, and I always imagine, because of quantum immortality, the fragility of life, well, it can always be externalized. Like if you go on the news and just in general knowledge, I think a person dies every single second on the planet, or is it 2 people every second? One or the other. So like 30 to 60 million deaths. I think it's 60 million deaths a year, which is, there's 31 million seconds in a year, so it'd be 2 every second or something like that. Anyways, the point is that a lot of people die all the time. And often of extremely mundane things, like walking under a ladder or slipping on the stairs and banging your head. We are simultaneously extremely resilient and extremely fragile. It's an odd conundrum, but yeah, at least our souls are apparently eternal. That's nice. Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 11 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. My favorite one, well, kind of 2, they overlap a bit, but just involves people talking. Alright, like the video if you feel so inclined, and let's get to it. Story by Cow Representative 210. A new home delivery. I'd been food shopping and decided to treat myself to a coffee in the cafe before I set off home. I bought a newspaper as I didn't fancy sitting just looking at my phone, something I very rarely do. I was there for about an hour, put my newspaper in my shopping bag, and set off home. I drove home and walked to my front door, carrying my bag of shopping in one hand and my keys in the other. Unlocked my front door and walked into my front room a couple of steps. On the sofa at the back of the wall, a ways away from the front door, I noticed a newspaper. I thought it was weird and wondered if my husband had bought one. Again, something he never does. Or if it was an old one he'd been looking at. I shouted and asked him, and he said no. By this stage, I was thinking odder and odder. I looked in my bag and no new newspaper there? I inspected the one on the sofa, and it was today's date. I just didn't put the paper there. I walked 2 steps into my house, clutching the bag the whole time as it was quite heavy. I had not taken the paper out and held it from the car. I'd tucked it away in my bag in the shop and had the keys in my other hand. Also, the paper on the sofa was placed rather than thrown, which I'd had to have done as I'd just walked in. So, that's my possible glitch, or I don't know if I was going mad, it just felt very wrong. Story by Jim Shark 49. The Booth at the End of Reality. Okay, so I think I'm a smart person, but I made a few mistakes in my life and ended up in a cleaner's job for a few years. I was cleaning this bar and restaurant. The restaurant opens up at 11 in the morning, bar at 12. A group of 4 people come in, different ages and ethnicities, from one another, which was quite good to see, because I rarely see white folk, especially older, socializing with people from other backgrounds. It looked out of place where I worked, but made me happy to see. They came in too early to sit in the restaurant for breakfast and lunch, so I thought they were going to leave, but instead they chose to sit in a booth at the bar. This didn't bother me. I was happy to just clean around them. This is where I can't explain what happened next. For the next 20 minutes, I was mopping the bar area. I'm always within about 10 meters of them, so I can hear what they're saying. But for the next 20 straight minutes, they talked over one another, and it was loud. They were speaking clear English, but I could only make out maybe 1 or 2 words every 5 seconds. Nothing made sense. I know this probably seems like nothing, but I swear, imagine listening to 4 television sets on high volume side by side with each other. And it's constantly talking, so imagine those 4 televisions are tuned to different news channels. When I was cleaning, I laughed inwardly, because the situation was so strange. It sounded intense, so I didn't bother mopping the area past them in fear I would be too disturbing. But when I finished, got in my car and drove, I absolutely crapped myself, scared, because I can't explain it. I think of it every now and then, and when I do, I imagine them staring at me, eyes beaming, telling me to leave, but their lips and mouths are not moving. I can just hear them telling me to leave in my head. I don't know why I always imagine this scenario. For the record, I don't take drugs or drink. I'm not and wasn't on any medication. I also don't have any mental health problems, apart from maybe OCD. 4 different people, perfect English, all talking loudly on top of each other for 20 straight minutes, not 5 to 10 seconds. 20 straight minutes, and nothing made sense, because all their words collided with each other. Again, I could only make out 1 or 2 words every now and then, from focusing on everything I had at the time. It was like watching a group of people trying to be people but not quite getting it right. Can someone please tell me if they've seen or experienced this before? When I tell my family about it, they just laugh. I don't know if people have the capacity to imagine the situation, because of never seeing anything like it before in life, TV or books even. Not even sure what I want from this, just to get it off my chest and out there, in the open, and see what others think. Yeah, this story and another one coming up toward the end, they share the same theme in that people are talking, but they either don't make sense, they're speaking English, or speaking over each other. I mean, I almost want to say this could be one of those roaming packs of people that are just going around. It's like a flash mob prank system. We know those do exist, but it doesn't seem to make any sense to do it where it's just one person there, you, the cleaner, early in the day. I guess it's possible that it was just a prank, but it doesn't fit. It's not a good enough prank, in my view, because there's no payoff. Unless they're recording it, but even then, most of the time, people recording it for like YouTube and stuff, they go after the person and tell them, hey, don't worry, it was a prank, you don't want to leave someone gaslit for their entire life. That's a bit rude. The far more unsettling, or fascinating, or both, idea is that they're simply aliens posing as human beings, trying to gather information, and it doesn't have to be so intense or technical, where, okay, they're aliens, they have advanced technology, but if they're anything like us, even if we had the technology of an alien that could reach us here, if we traveled to a different planet, we would want to go down and interact directly with the locals. But we wouldn't speak their language, we wouldn't understand their customs, we might not even use language at all. So these aliens might be trying to pass off as human beings, and they see human beings speak to each other, but they don't understand the rules of it. They might not even understand the function. There are things that animals do that we don't understand, and we might interpret them in a different way. So even though they're intelligent, it doesn't mean that they would understand us just like that. Maybe it is just aliens posing as human beings, these constructs or masks, bodysuits, whatever it might be. Maybe they understand how to transfer their sentience to a different android body. Although I don't think that's possible. I think sentience is more than just the patterns in your brain because of quantum immortality and other things. But anyways, my gut does scream alien. But in a way, even though that is unsettling, apparently it's not, because if they're aliens, they were really just there to observe. They didn't try to kidnap you, abduct you, implant anything weird. So, if it's aliens, cool. Keep on observing, just leave it at that. Or maybe make yourself known, but that's a question. How would people react in general, in the generality of society, to alien life being confirmed, intelligent alien life being confirmed? I mean, there'd be a lot of religious implications in that too, which might not go down so well. I don't know. I like to think that we could handle it, but maybe time will tell. We'll see. Story by Goodnight Meadow. Notarized, maybe. A friend in her 70s just passed 2 weeks ago. She was a small business owner and had been planning and talking about who she would leave her shop to for years. There was an initial will made in 2022, but in 2025 she changed it slightly. There was a first draft of this revised will shared through Google Docs between her lawyer and I, in which I was asked to make any necessary changes, as the lawyer was a friend of hers and not local. On the first draft, there was one executor, the woman who would be co-owning the business with me. However, the future co-owner didn't feel comfortable being the sole executor and asked that I also be added. That role isn't something I was hoping for by any means, but I changed it to make sure she felt better. Then I printed out the edited copy for our business owner friend to take. The day finally came when 2 separate witnesses and my friend's husband went with her to a notary and had the will made official. I saw everyone a little later in the day and was given a copy of the new will, now signed and notarized. When I received it, I looked it over and realized it was the first draft the lawyer had mailed to her rather than the edited version I had printed. I remember looking it over and being surprised, but I thought, oh well, it was still one executor. One could probably do it easier. A year goes by, and our friend passes unexpectedly in April. In the next few days that followed, the future co-owner and I couldn't find our own copies of the will anywhere. We were both shocked and started to panic a little when our deceased friend's husband couldn't find the original. While all 3 of us were looking for some kind of evidence to the new will, I shared a copy of the one from Google Docs just so everyone could remember the info, but I told them, it says on this copy that there are 2 executors, but the one signed only has 1. My friend, the executor, was surprised and worried since it was a responsibility she didn't want on her own. I told her I would be as much help as I could, so she'd do fine. Finally, on the 3rd day after our friend's unexpected death, her husband finally found the original and let us know so it could be picked up. When the future co-owner and executor got it and filed it with the clerk's office, she took a few copies and gave me one. The first thing she did was point out that I had been wrong. We were both named executors on the original will that was signed the previous year. I was in shock. Let me be clear, I'm still in shock. Because I literally remember where I was standing looking at my previous copy that was now lost, feeling surprised and slightly worried about how the edited version with both of us as executors had been forgotten and not used. But now, both our names are on it with the signatures of every person who was there that day at the notary. There is no explanation at all for this. I'm still shocked and forever will be, but I've put it in the jar of strange, unexplainable events from my life. I honestly shouldn't be so surprised anymore when things this obvious happen. My life is weird. Story by Floof the Toost. The zipper was innocent. So this story happened a few years back, but I just felt the urge to share it now. I think this is the perfect place to do it. Around the age of 16, I was alone on my trampoline, running around jumping, you know what people typically do on a trampoline. At one point, I started to get pretty tired as I have asthma, so I rested against a trampoline with the netting face forward. I blinked and suddenly I landed face first into the grass, spraining my wrist. I was confused but assumed I had somehow ripped a hole in it, though when I looked back, absolutely nothing. I was astonished. I searched around the trampoline to find any kind of answers, but nothing. No hole, no gap, not even a tear, and the zipper was completely zipped. I quickly went inside, freaked out, as I phoned my father. He told me to stop making up stories and bugging him at work, but I knew what had happened was real. I don't think I've ever touched the trampoline after that, but to this day I still have no idea what happened. But I remember it clearly, as if it happened yesterday. Story by Straight Bat 1046. I've dreamed this side quest. For the last 5 to 6 years, I've had a very specific recurring setting and scenario constantly appear in my head on and off. It's always the same type of place, an outdoor entertainment and shopping area at night with bright lights, open walkways, restaurants, staircases, palm trees, neon signs, people everywhere, etc. The layout always felt strangely familiar and detailed, and in these recurring scenarios I'm usually running around trying to get somewhere. A few days ago, my family and I were on our way to Disneyland when we passed by this outdoor area near the parks. I looked over at it and instantly got this overwhelming feeling of familiarity. Like, why do I know this place? I've never been here before, which is what made it so unsettling. The more I looked at the outside of it, the more I realized this was the exact place that has repeatedly appeared in my mind for years. Later, I looked it up online and found out it was Anaheim Garden Walk. Once I started scrolling through photos of it, my stomach genuinely dropped because it matched almost perfectly. The atmosphere, the walkways, the lighting, the overall vibe. What freaks me out is that I had never knowingly seen this place before in my entire life, never visited it, never walked through it, nothing. Yet somehow it felt deeply familiar the second I saw it. Has anyone else experienced something like this before? Recognizing a place you've never actually been to? So actually this is something that has happened to me before. When I was younger, much younger, we went to Toronto, then Niagara Falls. Now obviously I probably had seen pictures of the Niagara Falls themselves before I had gone, even though I was young. I don't remember how old I was, 12 maybe? Maybe even 10, I don't know. But I remember having pictured, or more like a raw emotion of a place. But as soon as I entered, it was kind of like deja vu. Like, okay, I've been here before. Everything was where I thought it was supposed to be. But it was only the lobby area of the hotel we were staying at. So, yeah, the Niagara Falls felt like deja vu too, but obviously I could have just seen a picture in some book, or maybe my friend showed me a picture of it sometime before. So that, I don't place anything mystical on that. But having this feeling of the lobby area being exactly something I've interacted with before, I don't know, it's weird. I mean, it wouldn't be reincarnation, because the hotel probably wasn't even that old. It wasn't a past life, and even if it was, it would be a different configuration. So I wonder sometimes if, when we dream, maybe we do astrally project, and probably more as kids. We could just travel around without really remembering it. Those memories don't imprint back into our brain, into our long-term memory. So we're just traveling around, and maybe just slight emotional sprinkles linger behind after the fact. Interesting. Story by MK260804, Quantum Kitten Mechanics. She's a 6-month-old kitten, very intelligent and sneaky. She was sitting by a chair in my living room. I was talking to her while looking at her. I speak to her casually as if she's a human, and she too was intently looking at me. Just at that moment, I left the living room and walked through a hallway that leads to my room, and when I reached my room's door, I saw my kitten was already there. She walked up to me from inside the room and greeted me at the door, as if she had already been there for a long time before I entered. My jaw was on the floor, and I couldn't believe it. It simply isn't possible. How would she get to my room from the living room without me spotting her in the hallway? The hallway is straight, narrow, no hiding places, and I walked straight. It just takes 4 to 5 seconds to reach my room from the living room. I was also looking straight while walking, not busy on my phone or anything, and there's no other way to reach my room other than the hallway. So how does this even happen? How? I even pinched myself to check that I ain't dreaming. I don't smoke or drink, I'm never high. This happened when I was in full consciousness, and I only have one cat. Story by 89, Multiverse Hair Care. The bulk of this story revolves around a hair straightener, and it's absolutely bizarre to me. My niece and her friend, 16 and 17, stayed overnight with me, slept in my son's room. They left the next day, which also ended up being the last time I ever saw someone I was seeing. This situation ended in a baffling way, and he is still lurking in my life, but has not apologized to me, which is confusing. I'm now wondering if that day I jumped timelines. Maybe this is why I don't understand what happened. Anyway, after my niece leaves, she texts me to let me know her friend left her hair straightener and a couple other small items. Mostly they just wanted me to find the straightener. We live in different cities, but I visit my nieces every month or two. I found this hair straightener in a colorful case on my son's bed. I very, very distinctly remember seeing it there and putting it aside on the bookshelf. Well, I remember seeing it and picking it up, but to note, I never remember seeing it in my house after that day. 2-ish months later, I'm going to their city and look for the straightener. I searched the house but can't find it, and assume one of the kids moved it. I feel bad since the friend has been waiting, and my niece reminded me about it the week prior. I see my niece and tell her I'm so sorry, I couldn't find it, but I'm sure it'll show up. She said, "Actually, and this is so weird, Amber just found it in her drawer a couple of days ago." My niece, her friend and I were so confused too. I hadn't been back to their city since, and the straightener hadn't shown up at her friend's house until 2 days before I came to their city to visit, the city I'm from. My understanding is this is not the place she typically keeps it, and she has definitely been in this drawer since leaving it at my house, and it just suddenly showed up there? This was around the same time I would have been looking for it to pack it, which is also weird. Every time I remember the image of it sitting on my son's bed in this colorful case, and I feel chills. How did it end up 2.5 hours away? Is the timing with that being the last day I saw my ex a coincidence? Don't know. Story by Melisodes. Larry joined the cloud. This was several years ago when my father was sick and in skilled nursing. He was in very bad shape. He couldn't walk and could barely speak. To everyone's frustration, having a conversation with him was almost impossible. Now to the second act. My father's brother is Larry, who lived 3,000 miles away. Larry had died suddenly of a heart attack while in the emergency room. I learned about the death after coming home from visiting my father. Larry had died earlier that day. For more background, my father and his brother were similar in age and were best buddies growing up, and really loved each other. But they were living on opposite sides of the country, so they could only meet up every 5 years or so. My father hadn't seen Larry for several years, and they hadn't spoken in a long time. I can't remember exactly how long. Once we heard about the news about the death, the issue became, do we tell my father? We all agreed that we should not, since it would upset him greatly and perhaps worsen his condition. The next morning, we nervously visited my father, feeling guilty about keeping such a big secret from him. We sat down at the foot of his bed. He looked at us briefly, and then turned his head to his right, looking at an IV bag hanging from a stand. He raised his arm and pointed at the IV bag. He then stated, "Larry has one of these." Yeah, the emotional story of the batch. Mostly have to have one for each batch. Not always, but yeah. Something about it, man. You know, if you care about someone, even if you don't speak to them often, that's like, I think, you can tether yourself to someone by proximity and constant interaction, constant thought about them. The quantum entanglement, though, of the person, it's a macro entanglement, you could say. I think it persists, even if you separate. It doesn't matter, because you were already entangled. That bond doesn't sever just because you haven't spoken to each other in a while. It remains. I think it's eternal, or at least in this life. Yeah. I wonder if it would persist with quantum immortality. Are you still entangled if you switch universes? Maybe not. That's a good question. Story by Sufficient Habit, 4663. Fashion Lag. I'm more pissed about this than scared, as I already have a lot of irrational fears that make me paranoid, so I really didn't need this weird as hell experience. So if anyone has a logical explanation, I'm all ears. Also, English isn't my first language, just to say that. I talk a lot. So I'm supposed to be going out with a friend today, and about an hour ago I was getting my clothes. I look in my closet, get a pair of black pants, and I find this black shirt with a small red rectangle in the top right. It was the same one I wore yesterday evening, which surprised me, because if I wear something for a couple of hours, most of the time I just leave it on my chair when I take it off. But whatever, maybe yesterday I decided to be good and put it away. I smell it and it's good, so onto my bed to wear after a post-shower it goes. Then I take a look at my clothes and think, these pants suck, so I go downstairs in my laundry room for another pair. There weren't any better jeans, however, there was a better shirt which I took. I go back upstairs, lo and behold, the black shirt is now another black t-shirt of mine, but with the Levi's logo in the center. Of course, I'm like, the frick? Granted, I wear glasses, but I'm pretty sure I can distinguish a shirt with tiny rectangle from a shirt with a big as hell red logo in the center. But I try to be rational, and think that maybe I just grabbed the wrong one. They're both black, after all. For all I know, I grabbed it by the back and didn't notice. Sure, I clearly remember smelling the damn shirt and seeing it on my bed, but memory is unreliable. I look through my closet to ease my mind. The damn shirt with the rectangle was gone. I take all my black t-shirts in said closet, and it's nowhere to be seen. The frick! Never in my life have I hallucinated, and I clearly saw the rectangle, so it wasn't a plain shirt that I mixed up with the other one. Do I have ghosts who think they have a better fashion sense than me? They don't, although that shirt is mediocre. Story by It's Hoo Hoo. The Silent Cafe. I wouldn't believe this story if it didn't happen to me, and I probably would question myself if my mother hadn't also been there and seen the same thing as me. My mom and I were shopping in this little mall for furniture. By little mall, I mean it only had maybe 10 to 15 stores that only sold furniture, electronics, homewares. It didn't have traditional multiple entrances or food courts or anything else normal malls have. It did have one small cafe though. The whole mall was pretty much empty. It was the middle of the day during the work week, so not many people were out and about. My mom and I were looking specifically for mattresses, so kept hopping around the bedding stores. To get to the next store, we had to walk past the cafe. There were tables and chairs inside the cafe that were empty, but outside the cafe, in the walkway of the mall, there was a row of tables for a couple set up, maybe 5 tables, with 2 chairs each. All of these were full. Approaching the cafe, my mom made a comment that it was weird that all these people were sitting at the cafe when there was no one else around the mall, and I agreed. As we walked past them, it seemed like they were all talking at the same time. All their mouths were moving as if in deep conversation, but as we walked along the line of the tables and chairs, we couldn't make out one word. It sounded like general background noise. We were walking close enough to definitely pick up a word or two. Think of the classic, and they were roommates, Vine, but nothing. Just a bunch of people staring at each other and talking but not saying words. My mom and I were squeezing each other's arms the whole time, and when we finally passed the cafe, we immediately started talking about how weird it felt. It felt like they weren't real people. It didn't feel like we were in the presence of people, if that makes any sense. It felt like an empty mall despite the cafe patrons chatting at the tables. By the time we finished at the store and came out again, the cafe was empty. We were there for maybe 20 minutes. We still talk about it to this day, but no one else really gets how weird it felt. You just had to be there, I guess. Now, NPCs or weird humanoid creatures are a recurring theme in my nightmares. Now time for the jokes of the day. The day I turned 42, my daughter walked up to me and said, "Happy," and started timing her watch. After a long silence, she said, 42nd birthday. I was so proud. Yeah, I would be too. "Can you take off the corset? I can't breathe," a woman said to her husband. "Sure, if it will make you stop laughing and tell me how I look in it." Yeah, that would be funny. Every time I hear about a corset, I always think about the scene in Pirates of the Caribbean, the first movie, where Elizabeth is constraining her lungs so she can't breathe and just passes out and falls into the water. No injuries apparently from that fall. Pretty impressive. I changed a light bulb, crossed the street, and walked into a bar. My life is a joke. My daughter said, "Daddy, I saw a deer on the way to school this morning." I said, "That's great, but how did you know it was on its way to school?" Smartest deer in the world, huh? I just turned 40, and I groan every time I get up now. I'm finally a grown man. Well, I'm almost 36 now. I still don't groan, so that's good. Maybe at 40, that's when you have to. It's like a mechanic of the universe. When you hit 40, you have to groan when you get up. My dad did that too. It's just, yeah. we'll see. Alright, if you want more stories, glitches up here, check them out, and see you next time.